So Alex, we got Greg on the line. What do you want to ask him?
On the financing side, was it difficult coming out of being a W-2, coming into commercial investing? Was it difficult to get that first loan, or were you able to rely on your partner?
We're looked at not only as a property, but we're looked at as a group of investors. The net worth and liquidity doesn't necessarily have to do with an individual. It has to do with the group that is buying the property. I guess that's one aspect of why partnering can be important, because you may have the net worth, you may not have the liquidity.
Hey, I'm Brian Briscoe, host of the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. And this podcast is different from everything else out there. I bring together new and inspiring investors on each and every episode and let the aspiring investors ask the questions that they need answered. And if you're an aspiring investor yourself, you probably have the same questions. So before you get to this episode that we have prepared for you, make sure you hit the subscribe button and that little notification bell to make sure you get notified every time we post a new episode. And now, enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe, and I'm very excited for today's show. It's one of our Ask the Expert episodes. We got two great people on the line with us today. We got Greg Scully and Alex Darst. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brian. Good to be here.
Thank you.
All right. And as is tradition, we're going to put our experienced investor in the hot seat first. So, Greg, that's you. And so let's start out by having you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Greg Scully with Real Wealth Solutions, a small team doing syndications in the apartment and also the RV space. We also property manage a portion of our portfolio. So we are now full-time commercial real estate investors out of Johnson City, Tennessee, by way of Alaska. We were in Alaska for 40 years up until about 3 years ago. Did W-2 work for 20 years, slowly transitioned into working for ourselves, first with a small retail business back in Palmer, Alaska, that did not go as well as we liked, and then kind of started looking around. Took the big deep dive into real estate with a Than Merrill Flip This House conference, did the 2-day thing and just went down the rabbit hole from there. Eventually got into a couple education platforms that brought us to multifamily. First deal landed in Tennessee. It was a bit of a bear. So I traveled back and forth for about a year before the wife and I relocated down here, we'll say semi-permanently.
Nice. So when you say we, are you talking about you and your wife, or do you have another business partner? Who's the we in this?
We, Real Wealth Solutions is myself, my wife, and our main partner, Darren Light, who hails out of the Knoxville area.
Okay.
So we have been working together, not exclusively, but almost exclusively, certainly in the apartment and RV space. Darren, Kim, and I work pretty much on everything together.
Okay. And you say you started flipping. I think a lot of people start at that spot. What got you into flipping? And then the follow-on question to that is what got you out of flipping and made you decide you wanted to move on to multifamily?
Yeah, we didn't start flipping. That was just the first introduction to the industry, was that Flip This House conference. They actually talked a little bit about multifamily at that. It was like a 3-day thing. I was more interested in the more passive side of it. So I went down the apartment rabbit hole and then joined a couple of education platforms. We did get into flipping, and we've done half a dozen, maybe 8 together. Darren has done more than I have through his career. Largely, we did that for the transactional side of the income. The passive income from multifamily is kind of a slow grind till you get to a reasonable number. And having done, we left our jobs. We did every financial trick to try and scrape capital together from a pretty modest middle income history, and flipping houses gave us decent chunks of money to give us some runway.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that a lot of people realize when they're flipping houses. It does give you chunks of income, and it does give you a lot of flexibility. But something else you mentioned that I'd like to highlight is multifamily. I think it's a lot better at building passive income, and it does take a while. It's not a get rich quick scheme, but it does definitely take a while. And I think your path is very similar to a lot of people listening, for one thing. So now you mentioned your first multifamily property. I think you called it a beast or a bear. I don't remember which one, but one of those words. Can you shed some light on that one? Why was it so difficult?
Yeah, my first one, I actually invested passively. So that's kind of how I got to look behind the curtain of syndications. We did a passive investment. And then our first active one uh, was a bear. On paper, it was your typical value add. What happened in reality was we went 100% vacant and had significant contractor problems. And we made money in the end, not as much as we had projected, but it was quite a bit of a slog. Took about 2 years, but we were able to exit it with a profit. And most of the value was through the experience, not in the money side of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. Now, typically, I ask the experienced investor to deep dive on a property. Do you want to deep dive on this one, or is there another one you want to talk about?
We could talk about, let's deep dive on that one, because we've had, I don't think the horror stories are talked about enough. And is it truly a horror story if we made money? No, but there's a lot of survivorship bias in this business. So we've had plenty of success, but yeah, we could talk about the one that knocked us around a bit.
So you say on paper it was the classic value add. You think when you buy it, I assume you're going to go. Your plan is to go in, fix things up, raise rents, keep occupancy up, and just finish the value add. And you said occupancy went to 0. What happened there?
It was basically an inherited landlord, wife of the original owner. Owner had passed away, so now she had it. It was running about 85% occupied. Well below rents, not managed properly, just all of that stuff that you see is like, oh yeah, that's, it'd be a great value add. What we didn't foresee was that the rents were so low that as we tried to implement a rehab plan, 3 buildings, we were going to vacate 1 building at a time and just go around in a circle and make, everything was great. As we started to implement the plan to non-renew people, the word got out that change was coming, and there was just a mass exodus.
Ooh, yeah.
So we underestimated the transitory nature of the tenant base. If average rent is whatever it was, $350 or $400 in a $900 market, their motivation is to stay in whatever place is charging them $350, $400. So they just left.
Yeah.
And then at that point, there was significant construction going on because all of the outside decks were basically, they were wood and or concrete and were deflecting. They were actually under notice from the city there were screw jacks holding them up. So that was part of their motivation to sell, is like, you need to do something about this, or potentially you're facing condemnation. So at that point, we just ripped off the Band-Aid and went to full-on construction mode.
Yeah. Now I've done several value adds before, and when we come into properties like this, there's pros and cons to what you ended up with. I don't think anybody plans on going to 0 occupancy, but when we look at coming in with a property that has below market rents, I always try to pick a rental point to incentivize a small portion of the people to get out, because you want people to turn over. You want units to come available, and you want to renovate everything. But I don't think you ever want everybody to move out at once. So yeah, that's something that's hard to predict. I've never had that happen before. We usually had a nice, easy, incremental move out, but
I don't recommend it.
Yeah. Unless there are people that do that. There
are people that do that very intentionally, and that's part of their business plan theoretically from day one. Which that was not the case for us. So it became it was such a barrier. Like, hey, we moved down here to help Darren run the show.
Yeah, and when you're doing that intentionally, you probably start with a lot more money on the sidelines, a lot more money to keep the property moving and operating, and to pay all the bills and everything else. But yeah, if you're not intending on vacating the property and it happens, you got to start juggling and making things happen. So,
and this was 62 units, so it wasn't it wasn't a small property. To have that much, it basically almost turned into a development job.
All right, so you guys flipped the switch and you just went full on construction mode. How'd it go from there?
We had problems with the contractor. They didn't do stuff to code. So a lot of that work had to be redone. We were on a bridge loan. Miraculously, we were able to refinance from bridge to bridge. I don't know if that's done very often, but we pulled it off. So there were multiple points in the process where like, well, here it is, we're sunk. And then you just, a lot of lessons on perseverance and just
Absolutely.
keep asking, and you find somebody that can help you out.
Now, was this a syndication or was this
No, it was a joint venture. So there was a small group.
All right. And you mentioned the learning aspect from there. What would you say your biggest learning point from that project was?
A lot of it had to do with vetting. There's so many of them. Vetting contractors, making sure you have the proper budget. A lot of it is a little more holistic in the sense that, when you see a property that's 75, 80, 85% occupied, there's opportunity there, but there may be some underlying things that we didn't think about specifically. It's like, what is this tenant class? What's their motivation? There were really no sophisticated leases holding anybody there. So their incentives were not to stay there and pay rent. It's virtually impossible to collect on them anyway.
Yep.
So, just be very aware that the worst case scenario, even though we didn't hit the worst case scenario, we came pretty close.
Yeah.
It can happen.
And you said in the end, you ended up selling the property and making money. Was it stabilized? Did you finish the value add?
No, we ended up getting through 2 of the 3 buildings. And at that point, capital was tight. We start doing that financial engineering analysis type thing. It's like, even if we finish this, we'll be able to refi with a reasonable or any return. And then even if we refi, we'll probably still be capital poor to nest egg the project along. So we got some brokers' opinions of value at that time. When did we sell this? A couple of years ago. The market was fine. I have no apprehension in saying we got saved by the market to a large extent. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So we got 2/3 of the way through it, put it on the market. Somebody saw it. And then, because the business end was proven at that point. So they just had to perform to our internal comps for the rest of the building. And so we kind of ran out of gas and somebody else can come in with new capital and take it the rest of the way.
Yeah, that's something that's, I think, very beneficial as a buyer when you're looking at something that's partially renovated. You said the magic word for me, that the self comps, you can look at the units and say, this is what the new units are getting. And there's no guesswork there anymore. It's just like they're renovating units, they're putting new tenants in. I know exactly what the potential rents are on this because they're hitting it. And you can come in and from the new buyer's perspective, that's much less of a risk than where you guys started. And quite frankly, in a market that's appreciating like we saw from, I came in the business in 2018, but I say 2018 to 21 and probably earlier in an appreciating market like that, some of the value adds, some of the meat on the bone properties actually, sold for a higher price for a little bit of a premium because people are looking.
Yeah, we were paid for other people's hopes and dreams. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's just how the market works, When things are really, really rosy, people have lofty hopes and dreams and prices get bid up based on people's hopes.
Well, and sub 4% interest rate certainly makes a lot more business plans viable.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you can get 3 point something on your interest rate, it's just like, I'll buy that.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. Appreciate you for sharing that. And, I think you also said that sometimes these types of deals don't get talked about enough. And there is a survivorship bias, people who, crash and burn don't talk about it and they leave, they don't spend a lot of time in this business. So good point there as well. Shifting gears slightly, I'd like to ask everybody a little bit about their motivation, something I call their big burning why. So what is your big burning why?
I just say it's optionality. I did the W-2 thing for 20 years. We were very intentional at that time with how we wanted to raise a family, one parent at home, which ended up being my wife, Kim. And then as we transitioned, we actually switched roles. I quit the job, she got full-time, and then I was able to go back and forth. Ultimately, I just at some point wanted to live where I wanted to live. And you still have to show up for your partners, show up for your tenants for that matter. But to some extent, we wanted to be calling the shots for our own destiny a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even just so, what is it? It's the 2nd of January. We were in Arizona, hanging out with my mom and dad. We were still working, but we didn't have to ask anybody if we want, if we could go. We just went.
I love that. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything. And, having quit my W-2, a year and a half ago, there's some things that, it is nice having that paycheck every other week or twice a month. But, there's benefits on both sides of the fence. And I quite enjoy it on the side I'm on right now. So never asking anybody for permission and being able to do what you want, work from you want, where you want, live where you want. I love it.
I mean, we're very, very active in most of our deals. We straight up work more now than we ever did doing W-2. Just
I do too. I do.
For sure.
Working for yourself is a lot nicer than working for somebody else. I guess one of the downsides, and maybe from my wife's perspective, is I had a job that I used to bring home at night, and now that I work from home, I'm always at work. So there is that as well. So achieving the balance is in some ways easier, some ways not, in my perspective. But well, cool. Well, last question for you. What's up next for you?
Scale. I mentioned before, we're property managing a small portion of our portfolio, 65 units over 2 properties, a couple of hours apart from each other. And that raises its own set of challenges with having, the labor resources for a 31 unit property versus a 108 unit property type thing. So, we've always heard that, scale is better. To some extent, we were taking what the market was giving us for opportunity for where we were in our business, but we are far more focused on either buying larger properties or properties in close enough proximity to the stuff that we're already managing to get scale that way.
Awesome. Well, best of luck to you. And, today's second day of the new year, and hopefully you guys can crush 2023 and make progress towards all that. That said, we're going to shift gears one more time and welcome Alex to the show. So Alex, welcome and thanks for hanging out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you letting me on.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, the show wouldn't go on without you. So I appreciate you for being on here. Do us a favor and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I graduated college about 2 years ago. Since I was probably in middle school, in the back of my head, always was thinking that I was going to end up in real estate. I didn't know what capacity that would be in. So coming out of college, my foot in the door was real estate sales with the intention of, turning into a full-time investor down the road. I looked at property management, I looked at sales. I wanted to learn how to sell, also, how to work with people well, manage my own time, my own money. And it's definitely taught me that so far. So my plan at the moment is then to, in 2023, acquire my first deal.
Awesome. Great time. I think, once again, first part of the year, a lot of people are making New Year's resolutions. I think 2023 is going to be a great year, and hopefully there's a lot of buying opportunities. And I'll tell you, you got plenty of runway between, January 2nd when we're recording and December 31st. So just keep on pushing towards that goal, and I'm sure you're going to get there. Speaking of, something that helps people get their goals is having a good, solid why. So what would you say your big burning why is?
I think it's very similar to what Greg said. I think it's just having the option to do other things than wake up and have to go to work, right? I think for me, if I want to down the road focus on impact instead of income, have that option. And I think my short-term why is supplemental income for the sales job. It can be unpredictable at times. Yep. And I think consistency from a multifamily asset, I think would really help me get through those periods where maybe sales are slow. Yeah. But yeah, I'd say that's it for me.
Yeah. If you invest properly, and I think Greg mentioned this up front, it takes time to build that. But once you have it built, it's a really nice thing to have. It's really nice to have those monthly checks coming in that are going to come in whether you work or not. That's something that is definitely worth putting some time and effort into. So Alex, that said, we got Greg on the line. What do you want to ask him?
First question on that first deal, the 62 units on the financing side, was it difficult coming out of being a W-2, coming into commercial investing? Was it difficult to get that first loan, or were you able to rely on your partner?
Well, it was really about relying on the rest of the group, how they appear to lenders. I did not say that very well, but I think, when We are looked at not only as the property, but we're looked at as a group of investors. So the net worth and liquidity doesn't necessarily have to do with an individual. It has to do with the group that is buying the property. I guess that's one aspect of why partnering can be important, because you may have the net worth, you may not have the liquidity, or you may have the skill set, but you don't have any money. So that's where the partnership kind of helped out with. So we were, Darren and I and Kim were very much boots on the ground. There were other people in the partnership that were not, but they brought more net worth and liquidity to the table.
Yeah,
I see. And along kind of the lines with the partnership, kind of getting started out and trying to decide, should I go in by myself? So should I actively look for a partner? What are some maybe red flags that I should look for if I go the partner route?
Red flags, I mean, I wouldn't, I've never done a background check on one of my partners. But I did know them all prior to investing with them. So I wouldn't be quick to partner with people. I would get to know them one way or the other. And, and my specific example is they were all part of the education platform that we came up together. So, we were all familiar with each other, had interacted to some extent, one way or the other. And you have to be comfortable with the person, not only what they can bring to the table.
Yeah. I'd say, a lot of people will do something similar, on their first deal, they'll partner with people, especially in education programs. They'll partner with people in the education program. And I would say that just remember, a partnership on a first deal, you guys are coming together for one deal. It doesn't mean you have to partner on future deals, and that's something I did something similar, came up with a partnership out of the mentorship program I was in. We did one deal together. We liked each other and we decided to do several more. So I'm going to answer it from a slightly different perspective, like longevity. Greg said, be slow to get a partner or to form partnerships. And I think maybe I formed it a little fast and didn't really make sure that we were completely aligned, had some really good partners, very talented individuals. But something I would say is if you're going to turn into a long-term partnership, make sure there's alignment, make sure you guys are going the same direction. You want the same things. I think it's a lot easier to make a partnership like that on one deal because you come up with a business plan and here's our business plan. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to handle it. And here's how we're going to make decisions if things don't work out. But if you're trying to get into a longer term partnership, I think you better make sure you're aligned. And like Greg said, be slow to partner up.
Yeah. And you'll figure out along the way, you'll partner with people. Hopefully things go well enough. But as you go through that process, you'll figure out who you want to continue to work with. They'll be doing the same thing. At the end of the day, we have to get along well enough to run a business. We don't have to go out to dinner every Friday night and hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. You have to get well enough to run a business. I think that's very, very accurate.
Yeah. Another question on kind of the underwriting side, a lot of people starting out, they don't know what they don't know. What are some kind of unexpected expenses that, maybe rookie investors don't account for in underwriting?
Yeah, property taxes is a big one. That can be very market specific. You have to know how they're assessed, when they're assessed, because you may specifically have to input that line item into a particular year in your underwriting when the reassessment happens. I know in Texas, I don't invest there, but they chase property taxes pretty aggressively compared to, some counties in Tennessee. They only reassess every 8 years. It's actually quite easier to figure out what's going on in Tennessee. But you do just have to know. And property taxes can be weird in some ways too. In Chattanooga, there's some special use taxes related to how much parking lot acreage you have that don't always show up very easily. And then there's, special assessments that also fall off. So if you can pick up that you are subject to some special assessment for a water project that started 8 years ago, and a portion of that property tax is sunsetting, that might be something you have to remove. So that's a big one for me. Insurance, that's another big one. I don't care what the current person is paying for insurance. I don't know how well they're insured they are. So that's something we quote often and we quote early. And if you're doing agency debt, they're going to hand you a piece of paper with the insurance requirements. So you have to make sure you're getting things quoted correctly to begin with. So yeah, that's a big one. And I see a lot of just general and administrative stuff not showing up on people's underwriting. We have professional services for tax preparation and bookkeeping, and sometimes I don't see that showing up specifically.
Yeah, there's something about taking the previous owner's expenses from the T12 and just transferring them over, and I think a lot of people do that. It's a great starting point, but you have to do a little bit of verification. You have to make sure that you understand each line. And something Greg mentioned, you have to understand that you're going to operate the property differently than them. With the bookkeeping, with the admin type stuff. They may do their own bookkeeping and not have a separate line item for it. Or they may be performing a lot of the administrative stuff, whereas you might hire out for some of that. But Greg hit my two top items. Property tax and insurance are the two biggest things that I think two biggest pitfalls on insurance. And third one, he also hit, just make sure you realize you're going to operate the property differently than them, and make sure the things you plan to do differently are reflected in the underwriting.
Yeah, and then another one's like specifically to value add is utilities. If somebody's running stuff at 95% occupied, you can't just transfer over that utilities if you're planning on going and rehabbing a third of the units, because you're going to have a lot more carrying costs just to keep the lights on and the water on for your vendors. So utilities can be a little underestimated, specific to heavy value add stuff.
That's a good point. I'm actually building an underwriting class right now, and I did not put that in there anywhere.
All right. Boom. There you go.
Boom. Yeah. That podcast totally worth it today. Make a note, throw that in my underwriting, higher carrying costs. And it's something, I think we've seen the utility bills, and I've seen I've seen the utility bills come in when we're managing properties, and I've seen things go up. It's just not something that I specifically called out. So I appreciate that, Greg. Yeah. I learned something every episode, and that was one big aha for me. So anyway, Alex, back to you.
Yeah. Greg, if you had to start again, kind of at zero, and, maybe if you're in my shoes, I'm 23 years old. I'm an independent contractor, so I'm a 1099. Is there maybe something you would have done differently, or do you have some advice for me getting started out?
I mean, there's no regrets. I don't know if there's stuff I would have done differently, because I would only be framing that from knowledge that I have now that I didn't have at the time. So I would just say, just get started, just start doing it. I mean, that's where all the learning starts. I came up underwriting originally because I was in Alaska. I was going to be doing property tours. I did some property tours myself, but there's only so much I could do. So I kind of went down the underwriting path for, what skill could I bring to a partnership? As soon as you get handed those keys, that underwriting is very informative, but now you're dealing with people in the real world and pandemics and cold snaps and things like that. So I think most of the learning happens when you actually get into a property.
I agree wholeheartedly. I mean, I started out with single family properties, and I probably spent 2 years, going over books and thinking about it, and, trying to, hey, is this the right way to do things? And once I pulled the trigger, the learning really started. And I did the same thing with multifamily. I would say, with what Greg said, same thing is just get started. You can read books and listen to podcasts. This is a great podcast to listen to, by the way, but listen to podcasts, read books, do all of that, but just get started. Find something that you can do, find a place you can get involved and get started. And that's going to help you a lot, getting the ball.
Yeah. It's like, you can't go to a seminar to learn how to ride a bike. That's one of my favorite things. You just got to get on the bike at some point and figure it out.
Good analogy. It's a really good analogy. And speaking of podcasts, Greg, do you guys still run your podcast?
No, man, we shut her down.
Okay.
Yeah, we did 100 million episodes, and
Uh-huh.
we did our last episode a couple of weeks ago. But the Real Wealth Solution podcast is still out there for people to consume. But
But no more new episodes.
the return on effort wasn't there.
Mhm. Yeah. So anyway, another good podcast to check out, Real Wealth podcast. And Greg and his partner ran it together. Quick plug for that. Go check it out. And while it's still early in 2023, the episodes are still pretty fresh. So check it out. All right, Alex, back to you. We probably got time for one question, maybe two if we're short on our answers.
Okay. Yeah. Another one I had was, there's a lot of uncertainty as we've come into 2023 and then going into 2024. What do y'all kind of see on the multifamily side?
Interest rates are going to be high for the foreseeable future. You're either going to have to bring more money to the deal or beat people up on price. Planning on having to do both. So we're seeing some movement on price. I know you want to try and keep the answer short, but
I mean, go ahead
and
give us your thoughts, and I think we're good.
Well, there's fewer sellers, but I think there's the same amount of buyers. So that's going to do nothing for the old supply and demand. There's just more money chasing fewer deals. So I don't necessarily think that's going to help pricing that much. And the cap rates are maybe I've given a little back, but I mean, fundamentally, it's still a very strong asset class. So I think you'll be seeing more seller financing available. We've had that on a couple of deals, but it can be a little tricky because anecdotally, I'm hearing from capital raisers that capital is a little bit harder to come by for deals. And at the same time, you're also having to raise more equity. So those are two challenging things that are kind of stacked.
Yeah, I think a lot of signs are pointing towards, prices have to come down. The capital markets are a little more difficult to navigate. The stock market hasn't done well in the last 12 months. Crypto, that bubble kind of burst, so there's a lot less liquidity there. What I found on the last capital raise we did is exactly what Greg said, that, there's less people sitting on stacks of cash right now. I think prices have to come down, and the longer rates stay high, the more likely they are to come down, that those cap rates are to adjust. And personally, I think, a year ago when the Fed started raising rates, all the owners in the world said, oh, that's cute, and all the owners in the world thought that that the Fed was going to do a quick pivot. Okay, we'll raise rates for, 1 or 2 quarters and they'll come crashing back down. But, a year later, the Fed's still raising rates and still signaling they're going to raise rates. So I think a lot of the resistance for pricing, why pricing stayed high, is everyone was expecting the pivot, and everyone's expecting, that interest rates to be temporarily high. But the longer the rates are high, the harder it is for sellers to justify those costs or those prices. So I think prices are going to come down. Looking at my crystal ball, I looked at what the Fed chairman says. Does he always do what he says? No. But they're going to bring rates back down towards the end of this year. 2024, they want to have rates in the 4 range, and then in 2025 and beyond, their target's 2.5. So what I see is a year of high interest rates and them gradually coming off that mark in the future. So I think 2023 is going to be a great year to buy. That's just my 2 cents. And then 2024 and 25, when rates start coming down, that's just going to be throwing fuel on the fire. Anyway, my 2 cents. We'll see. My crystal balls are rarely accurate. So
yeah, I feel the same way. The Fed doesn't give a crap about what I think about their policies. The economy doesn't care what I think about it. So, I mean, you always just have to operate in whatever the environment is. So, have your buy box, have your fundamentals, and stick to them. There can be a tendency to, that whole FOMO thing, I think is real. I'm sure I've been a victim of it myself at times. But just, hey, here's what I can pay. Here's why. And it's a lot easier now to back up those price justifications with data, because for a long time, I'm like, am I the only one that thinks this property is only worth X and it always trades over ask? I'm like, what is going on? There's a lot more of us that our reasonableness is becoming louder.
Yeah, I think, Greg, you made a great point. You said the word fundamental that I've been thinking about a lot lately is, what are the fundamentals of real estate? And there's we have market cycles, and there are different phases of the cycle. And the people who are in trouble right now are the people who did not look at the downside protection. People who are getting in trouble right now are the ones that had variable rate loans with no rate caps or no exit plan. They didn't look at the downside. They bought into the euphoria, and they said, yeah, this bridge loan is going to work. We'll be able to refinance in 2 years, and didn't anticipate rates going up. So I think when you look at the fundamentals, you got to have, I think, kind of a longer window than 2 to 3 years, like a lot of the bridge debt will give you. You have to do some sort of downside protection, like rate cap insurance, I think is going to be a lot more. That's something that, I'm going to make sure I get, no matter what the Fed interest rate winds are looking like, is rate cap insurance. But so far I've been in 12 properties, and only one true bridge loan out of the 12. So far so good. I think we were fortunate in that aspect. Anyway, we are about out of time. So one last question for each of you. Greg, you get to go first. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, there's still episodes of the Real Wealth Solutions podcast out there, all on your favorite provider. You can reach us or find out what we're up to at realwealth.solutions is our main page for everything that we're kind of up to. I'm more active on LinkedIn, so reach out to me, Greg Scully, on LinkedIn. Happy to chat. Prefer longer conversations to shorter ones. That's it. Appreciate it. Thank you, Brian.
All right, love it. So we'll have the website and a link to the podcast and his LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Alex, same question for you. How can listeners learn more about you?
Yeah, social media is probably best. Instagram, it's alex.darst.realtor, and then LinkedIn, it's Alex Darst Realtor. And, I'll check my messages if you send me a DM.
All right. Sounds good. And we'll have links to those in the show notes as well. Well, once again, guys, thank you very much for making this a part of your holiday weekend, and look forward to getting this out on the airways. But thanks for your time today.
You're welcome. Good time, Brian.
Hey, if you like that episode, make sure to subscribe. But more importantly, if you haven't joined our multifamily educational community yet, which we call the Tribe of Titans, you are missing out. Get 30 days free by clicking the link in the description to this episode, or go to thetribeoftitans.info, and we'll see you there.